Good morning, everyone. Hope you're all having a wonderful day today. Today, we get to talk about the epidemic of rebranded optics in the US market. Now, this video is courtesy of Marooned Gun Memes on Instagram. He posted this photo, which got me thinking about making a video, so this is completely his fault, but you should still give him a follow because he posts funny pictures on Instagram. Now, what exactly is a rebranded optic? Well, it is exactly as it sounds. You have a manufacturer overseas, in this case usually in China, that has a base design for an optic through several different companies, and then a US company will reach out, ask them to make it, maybe a few small design changes here or there, or none at all, and then resell it for a higher price. This is a very common practice of using overseas manufacturing, importing it into the US with a healthy profit margin after claiming that it has the newest design features and it's totally built from the ground up, yada yada yada, when, that's not really the case. And some of the times you can have a Chinese company selling the optic directly on the US market through a shell company for very close to the original price, say somewhere between $60 and $100, and then you'll have your US resellers, not manufacturers, US resellers, with maybe a few slight tweaks here and there, selling it for somewhere between $250 and $400. And again, this is a normal thing in a lot of different industries. It's not just unique to the firearms and optic space, but it is something that I've seen pop up quite a bit more recently, with more and more new optics companies bringing their own quote-unquote designs to the market for wildly varying prices. And I get questions about different optics. I do review a lot of optics. Some of those are rebranded optics with a few design tweaks here and there. And so then I get asked to basically review the exact same optic the next week, which isn't particularly fun as a reviewer because reviewing the same thing week after week or something basically identical isn't particularly invigorating. Now, getting into a couple specific examples that I actually have on hand, the first is the Viridian RFX45, which is very similar to the Adaball E2. The Adaball folks seem like cool people, and the Viridian people are also cool that I've talked to. Full disclosure, both the specific examples that I'm going to talk about were sent to me by the quote-unquote manufacturer. The second is the Gideon Mediator, who I actually met Mike at TriggerCon, and he got me hooked up with this red dot. And while the RFX45 and Mediator are very different designs for a enclosed pistol optic, you can find anywhere from 3 to 10 different carbon copies of each from different manufacturers, and I have absolutely no intention of reviewing any of those carbon copies, even though there is going to be a few slight differences here and there. For instance, on the Viridian RFX45, their whole shtick is green. So it has a green emitter, and the dot's quite good. It is actually a good dot, which we'll talk about in just a minute. And with the Gideon Mediator, its claim to fame is that it's cheaper. And unfortunately, the emitter doesn't get quite bright enough. It has about one less setting on the top end that it needs, but other than that, it's a perfectly fine enclosed emitter optic, but we'll talk about that in a future video. Now, just because they are rebranded optics doesn't mean that they're bad or necessarily that they're overpriced, because each reseller slash importer does have some control about the differences for their specific optic. For instance, they can spec out higher quality coatings, better glass, different emitter options with different reticle options, slightly different tweaks to the body design, to the mounting design, some of the features that are actually in the optic. So there is some justification for the increase in price in certain circumstances. For instance, the Viridian RFX45 is actually a really good optic. The base design is perfectly fine. It does have a very thick top bezel for that top mounted battery, but it is very durable. I've dropped it multiple times onto an AR500 steel plate with no appreciable shift in zero on my Glock 17, and in fact it's still sitting on my Glock 17 after a considerable amount of time because I like it quite a bit. So just because they're rebrands doesn't immediately mean that they're bad or that they don't have any separating features from other optics that are, again, very similar to them, but it does make it very difficult for the end user to figure out which optics resellers are actually putting in any time and effort in design or QC as well, if you do QC work here in the USA after they're imported, which does add to the cost and to the value as well to make sure you don't get a DOA product at the end of the day. But it does make it very difficult for the end user to figure out what is actually worthwhile what is better than one versus the other, if there's a specific feature or something else like that, and manufacturers are probably being intentionally vague about where their product is coming from, and the fact that 10 other companies are selling basically the exact same thing, so it's very difficult to distinguish why company A is selling something for $25 more than company B when it's basically the exact same thing. And again, company A isn't telling you why they're charging $25 more. However, if they were more transparent with the different coatings, lenses, or, whatever else that they're doing to try and differentiate their product from the other, 10 carbon copies of itself, that would help the end user to figure out what is actually worthwhile. But I'm not sure if a lot of these manufacturers slash resellers would actually do that, because a lot of them probably aren't putting in that much work. They're just trying to make a quick buck because it is unfortunately easy to do. So now let's go ahead and talk about Import Yeti, and one of the companies that I personally work a little bit closer with. So Import Yeti is basically a public way to figure out where these companies are getting their products from. As the name implies, this basically gives you access to a lot of the import documents that these companies are using. So for instance, if we search Swamp Fox Optics on Import Yeti, now I'm not singling out Swamp Fox Optics specifically, I think they actually make good products. I've reviewed some of their stuff in the past and I've had good luck with them, so I'm not calling them out specifically, but if you do search them on Import Yeti, you can see some of their top suppliers from Cape Evolution Shanghai and, a bunch of other Chinese companies. You can kind of get a good feel of where they're getting their stuff from, their average order volume, how many shipments, so on and so forth. There is an insane amount of detail that you can get here. Now let's go ahead and talk about another company, Viridian Weapon Technologies. Now, Viridian, again, is a company I've worked with. They sent me the RFX 11 and RFX 45, both of which I have reviewed, both of which I like quite a bit for what they are. And we can see some of their top suppliers is Sunclear / Vector Optics. That's the exact same company. Sunclear was just the original name for Vector Optics. And Vector Optics is a company that I review a lot of products for. And they are a supplier for a lot of other optic companies in the US that resell their products, because Vector Optics actually makes a lot of the designs that these companies are then reselling. The reason why I work directly with Vector Optics is because they're actually making some of the cool stuff that just gets rebranded by American companies. So at the end of the day, are all rebrands bad? Well, no, a copy of a good design is still a good design. A lot of these companies are putting in a little bit of extra effort, refining the design and getting their niche in the optics marketplace. However, a lot of them are basically doing as little work as possible to make as much money as possible, and I wish some of these American resellers of these optics would be a little bit more clear as to what they're actually doing to differentiate their product from some of the others on the market. But that's about all I got for the video, guys. Let me know what you guys think in the comments down below, and with all of that out of the way, I hope you all enjoyed. I will see you in the next one. God bless.